Hey there, Branden Harvey here. Before we get started, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this week's episode, Who Gives a Crap? Who Gives a Crap is determined to prove that toilet paper is about more than just wiping bums. They make all of their products, toilet paper, tissues, paper towels, with environmentally friendly materials, and they donate 50% of their profits to help build toilets for those in need. And get this, they just released a limited edition toilet paper, the Coloring Edition. They worked with iconic artist John Bergerman to create limited edition toilet paper wrapper designs you can color in. It is hilarious and amazing and absolutely something worth checking out before they disappear. Who Gives a Crap is offering Sounds Good listeners $10 off their first order with the promo code SOUNDSGOOD. To get toilet paper delivered to your door, make a difference in the world, and support this podcast, just go to whogivesacrap.org/soundsgood and use the discount code SOUNDSGOOD. One more time, that's whogivesacrap.org/soundsgood with the discount code SOUNDSGOOD. Who gives a crap? Good for your bum, great for the world. All right, now here comes the show. As she became the first African-American woman to accept the prestigious Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes, Oprah Winfrey had one message for the world. Tell your story, because you too can make a difference. She made it clear that speaking our truth is the most powerful tool we have. This message hit hard and true for my guest on the podcast today, Kendall Ciesemier, who understands that speaking her truth and telling her story has the power to make a ripple effect beyond imagination. And it has, despite the odds stacked against her. At age 11, Kendall, who was born with a rare liver disease, was awaiting a liver transplant when she saw a TV special on African AIDS orphans. It changed her life and marked the beginning of an organization she founded called Kids Caring for Kids. Again, she was 11 years old. That night, she knew that she had seen the opportunity she was waiting for, her chance to give her life more purpose than the chronic liver disease she had grown up fighting against. The events and life turns that happen after this milestone in her life are wild. I don't even want to say them during the intro because I don't know if you'll believe me. So I'll let Kendall explain them during our interview today. But I will give a slight spoiler and say that her work has allowed for her story to intersect with Oprah, Bill Clinton, Kim Kardashian West, Alice Marie Johnson, and Donald Trump at some point. Oh my gosh, it's wild. I am Branden Harvey, and this is Sounds Good. This is the weekly podcast where we have conversations with inspiring people who are rejecting cynicism and using their lives to make an impact. Sounds Good is not your typical 3 Steps to Success podcast. We don't host this podcast for the sake of leaving you with bullet points on self-improvement. We deeply believe that our lives are more complex than that. So we show up here on Sounds Good to ask big questions, dive into nuance, and learn from each other's stories. I'm so excited for y'all to hear Kendall's story. She inspires me in so many ways. Let's dive straight into this. So Kendall, you wrote an incredible piece about Alice Marie Johnson that, spoiler alert, eventually led to Kim Kardashian West showing up at the White House to meet with President Donald Trump, and led to Alice Marie Johnson being freed from prison after 20-something years and getting to spend time in freedom with her family and her loved ones. That's a remarkable sentence. There's a lot that's going on there.
Yeah.
Before I kind of dive into anything, how does it feel to be in the midst of one of the wildest, but also most encouraging news stories of the year?
Yeah, it feels totally wild to me too. So basically what ended up happening was I work for a company called Mike, and we're committed to telling stories of change, both the movements and the makers. And I actually joined back in October of 2017. And what happened was my boss, Jake Horowitz, actually saw Alice's story. Alice Skyped into a Google event probably 6 months prior to me arriving at Mike. And he just thought, wow, she's really captivating. Like, we should really do something at Mike with her. And so when I arrived and he had started this new video team, we actually organized a Skype call and recorded a Skype interview. So that's originally what it was. It was a video op-ed that we put together of Alice sharing her own story about serving a life without parole sentence for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. And she had been in prison for 21 years. She was a 63-year-old great-grandmother and had obviously, done something very wrong and was part of a drug conspiracy and was held up on those charges, but had clearly done a lot of really good things since then, serving her time, and had been up for clemency 3 times, was denied 3 times, most recently by Obama. And after that, really felt like there was no hope. And we put out this story, and it immediately spurred kind of this viral reaction that we were not expecting. And
before we jump into that next step, I just want to back up and hear a little bit about your side of things really quick, because I guess I'm curious, had you been doing kind of video production stuff before you joined Mike?
Yeah. So I graduated college and always knew that I was going to dive into the world of broadcast journalism is what I really kind of thought.
Was there something in particular that inspired that direction?
Yeah, actually there was. I've known I wanted to do that since I was 11.
Really?
I saw basically an Oprah show that really changed my life. And I just then knew that I wanted to pursue that kind of journalism and that kind of work so I could inspire.
What was the show?
Oh, it was this Oprah show called Oprah special called Christmas Kindness. And it was back in, it was like so long ago, back in December of 2003. And Oprah had this huge Christmas party in South Africa where she showed these kids who were my age, I was 11 at the time, who were coming to her Christmas party. And then after that, she showed their homes, and they were living with no parents and taking care of their younger siblings because both of their parents had died of AIDS. And that episode changed my entire life.
Wow.
I sat there watching and felt like I had never seen something like that before. And was always almost angry that no one had told me about it and that no one had asked me for help.
And was this the 90s in the midst of kind of the AIDS crisis? It
was in 2003. So it was like right when the AIDS epidemic was kind of becoming a big thing that people were talking about.
In Africa, but in the US, things were a lot more kind of under control.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And so we'd kind of fixed our own AIDS problem in America, but around the world, it was a huge, huge issue. Still is a huge issue, but it's significantly better today. But the concept of children living without parents, I mean, I was so young. I was 11. I didn't even know what AIDS was. But what really struck me were this one girl in particular. Her name was Candy Sile, and she was 13, and she had just lost both of her parents to AIDS and was taking care of 2 younger siblings, living in a mud hut with no running water and no electricity. And I just felt that so hard. I just knew what it meant to go through something hard. And I just couldn't imagine having to live like that and to be without my parents, because my parents were really my everything. And so I literally took action that night, and it led me on this kind of crazy long journey to start a nonprofit and build an effort. But it was really since that
as
story.
a kid.
Yeah, as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
There's so many things to unpack within this. You're
I
like
know.
raising by it like it's no big deal. And I know it's your life, so it's something that, you've experienced, but I'm like, this is remarkable. Like, I watched TV shows when I was 11 and I didn't start a nonprofit. Like, so I guess, first of all, you watched this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Do you talk to your parents about it? Is that kind of what catalyzes this? Or okay.
So what happened was I literally that night, I was watching with my parents this like special, and then it was time to go to bed. And so I went to my bedroom and I just stayed up. Like I just didn't go to bed. I stayed up, and I actually Googled. I like went and searched on the computer, Googled AIDS orphans in Africa.
Whoa.
And, because on the episode, they said $10 buys a uniform for a kid to go to school. And you can't go to school there without a uniform.
Yeah.
I said, well, that makes no sense. And I have $10. So I'm going to figure this out. So what do you do when you don't know what to do? You Google it.
Of course.
And so I found World Vision originally, which is a world relief organization. They run an orphan sponsorship program. And I found this little girl, 8 years old, named Benit from Mauritania. And I was like, okay, that's it. Like, I'm going to adopt / financially support Benit. So I literally pulled out in my dresser drawer this wad of cash that was saved up birthday and Christmas money for my grandparents from like years and years and years. And I took out another envelope and I addressed it to World Vision headquarters, and I stuffed all my cash, $360 in the envelope. And I went to my parents' bedroom and they were like, what are you doing out of bed? And I said, well, I'm looking for a stamp. They're like, what are you doing out of bed? And I said, I'm not going to tell you, which of course, that doesn't really fly.
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah. And so I finally had to tell them, and they were like, okay, whoa. Like, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm adopting an AIDS orphan, and I just don't know if I should send $360 all at once or $30 each month, because it was really confusing. And I'm just looking for a stamp so I can just do it all at once. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, well, like, let's look into this. Like, let's go halvesies, like split it. That's a lot of money. And I'm like, no, this is my thing. I'm doing this. You can't tell me I'm not. And so obviously they had to like de-escalate the situation and figure out like what I was talking about. But they let me do it. And, I got months later, got a letter back from the girl I was sponsoring, and she was in school for the first time. And it just totally changed my whole concept of what you could do for other people. Wow. And I felt so empowered, and I just knew I wanted to do more. And that really set me off on this whole long journey to kind of formalize my efforts slowly. And I can keep going, but there's obviously a lot to that story.
I want to keep on. This is amazing.
Okay.
I first of all, I love so much that this foot in the door of, $30 a month or however many dollars all at once. That's a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. But what it did was it got your head in the game to think, okay, now what else can I do? Now how else can I get involved?
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was a catalyst for more.
Yes.
Help me bridge this gap between you saying, okay, here's an organization doing work in this regard. I'm going to send them money, to saying, I'm going to do my own thing. Yeah.
So originally it started small. So I'll bring in another element of the story. I was diagnosed with a rare liver disease when I was about 2 months old.
Oh, wow.
And so I always knew I was going to have a liver transplant. And it became more apparent at that time when I was 11 in 5th grade that I was going to need one sooner rather than later. Wow. And so when I saw this episode, it was a kind of a compilation of things. It was like I knew I was going to have this transplant probably sooner rather than later. I was already listed, probably not going to get an organ off the list because it's literally impossible. It's not impossible, but it's hard. You have to be really, really sick, especially if you live in major metropolitan areas. And I was from Chicago. And so my dad got tested to be a donor. So, and he was a match. So I actually ended up.
It's for liver? It's for your liver?
Liver. Yeah, a liver. So
do we have multiple livers?
No, but you can donate part of your liver because livers grow back.
Oh, okay. So
they generate, they like self-generate.
So your dad was a match.
So you can take part of someone's liver and it can grow into a full thing.
Wow. Okay.
Which is amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And so my dad was a match and we had like a date, and it was going to be right after I finished my 5th grade year. And so kind of knowing that I was going to go through all of this, and not really having any idea of what it meant, but having had surgeries growing up, I knew that people give you a lot of, gifts and teddy bears and people want to do things for you.
I love where this is going.
And it's a lot of attention. And to me, it was the last thing you would ever, ever, ever hear me talk about was this. Like my deepest, darkest secret was that I had surgeries and I had scars on my stomach. Like it was something that I was deeply ashamed of when I was growing up because it made me feel different and I didn't like that. And so I knew that this was going to be a very public thing. I have a very tight-knit community and I just so much wanted to have people focus on something else. And I don't actually know if I fully understood all of those feelings at the time, or if it was more simple of I want people to not give me gifts because I don't need anything.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't need like 20 teddy bears.
Totally.
So I worked with World Vision originally to find a large community in Zambia, one of the most highly affected areas by the AIDS epidemic at the time. I picked that project. They had an annual budget of $60,000. And I said, okay, that's my goal. I'm going to raise $60,000. And my whole concept was like, okay, well, I have $10. My friend has $10. Her friend has $10. Like we all can just, put it all together and we can raise a lot of money. And that it didn't take a lot to make a big difference. And I wanted other young people like my friends to be aware of what was going on to other kids and also to be contributing to help them themselves. And so I kind of started the effort. Meanwhile, I was having 2 liver transplants. So it originally was 1 liver transplant, turned into 2 liver transplants.
How did it turn into 2?
So, I essentially got an aneurysm of the hepatic artery, which is the major artery that feeds into your liver. And those are not good.
Oh, wow.
And essentially what I've kind of come to know, because it was honestly I was so young. And so I didn't actually know a lot what was going on at the time other than that I was really sick. But essentially that kind of complication is something that happens to like 0.1% of people who have transplants. And the mortality rate is like 98% of people die from these things. Whoa. And so I knew it was very serious at the time, but I was in a coma for a week. And so I kind of went into something and didn't wake up. And so a lot of it is so fuzzy because, you're under a lot of drugs to like make you not remember anything. And I remember waking up and going like, what just happened? But eventually I got better enough to stabilize, and everyone around me kept on saying, you're going to need a second transplant. And I was in the ICU at the time. And of course I was like, I just had that. I just had a transplant.
Yeah.
I'm good, actually. Like that was good for me. Hard enough. We're fine here. Don't need a second transplant. But they were just so worried. The doctors were so worried because the literature just is not positive on these complications. And so the idea of getting me stable was like the first issue, and that they were all very concerned about it and had other teams of doctors come in from Northwestern to try to like figure out how to deal with this because so few people had ever dealt with this. Mostly they just find these things on autopsies. So it was really, really lucky that they had found it when they did. And I don't really, again, like, I don't really know a lot of what happened. I had to actually call my doctor. Like, I tracked her, my old doctor from, like, my old pediatric doctor for my whole life. I tracked her down like recently and had a phone call and asked her what happened.
That's
because
funny.
I wanted to know.
Yeah. What a weird thing to, like, not know a big part of your life. You know, that thing that's so significant, and you're like, I don't really know.
Yeah, like a huge, significant thing. And I knew, I guess, broad strokes of things, but when you try to, like, Google online, it's very dense, like, medical terminology and what kind of aneurysm was it? What does that mean? I know what brain aneurysms are, but what did this look like? Why would you die? What were the concerns? Like, there was a lot of talk of, like, that I was bleeding out. What does that mean? Like, what happened in those circumstances? And honestly, like, I never asked my parents because I think it's like, they say it's like the worst day of their entire life. And so I never really wanted to, like, make anyone relive that.
I bet.
I've actually never told this story, which is pretty interesting.
I'm honored.
Yeah. And so I ended up getting relisted immediately, and was in the ICU long enough to be healthy enough to undergo a 13-hour operation, but sick enough to be in the ICU, which is a very delicate balance and kind of the only way you can get an organ. And so that's your, like, status 1 when you're in the ICU. You're like the next person to get it.
So your first one was a portion from your dad's.
Of my dad.
And the second
one was a deceased donor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I actually know his family now, which is pretty wild.
That's incredible.
There's a 24-year-old who died in a motocross accident. His name is Aaron Kramer, and he was from Massachusetts, but died in a motocross accident in South Dakota.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And he was an organ donor, and so his
I was an organs
got to go to people like you. Did other organs go to other people?
Yeah, so his family's actually met the man who got his heart too.
That's beautiful. That's huge.
And I finally reached out to them. Like, there's all these rules around what you can do and what you can't do. And if it's open or if it's closed, it's similar to adoption in the sense that, like, both parties are very viciously protected with laws. And so there was a lot of laws saying essentially that we could send letters to them and we knew his name, but we didn't really have any control over whether or not they contacted us back. And so actually years and years and years later after this transplant, I found this page where it's like a legacy page where people had written about him and his death, and his parents had actually shared an update kind of recently to when I was searching for it about meeting the man who got his heart and how much it meant to them. And so I was like, well, because this man who had gotten his heart was doing incredible things for people in the criminal justice system. And I don't know, I guess part of me just felt like, a huge part of my story is about paying it forward and showing what happens when you can do that. And, I take that responsibility very seriously. And I just thought maybe they would feel good knowing that I have taken it seriously and have tried to do good things for other people, and that their gift didn't go to waste.
And do you feel like that really was your motivating factor in all of this, was thinking like, I'm given this life? Like, what do you think that was for you?
I think there were a few factors. Yeah. I think, first off, I grew up knowing and feeling that I was super different and feeling very alone in that. And that there was just a lot of stuff that no other kids around me had to deal with. And so I think I had this sense of empathy that was probably well beyond my age. And I kind of was always the person in growing up that, like, really sought after the kids who were having a hard time, whether it was the girl who was from the Czech Republic and, didn't know a lick of English, and my teacher sat me next to her so I could teach her and go to ESL with her. Or, I just was constantly trying to, like, I just gravitated towards other people that I thought understood that feeling. And I wanted to help them. And so I think when I saw these kids, on the Oprah show, I just really identified with the struggle, right? And wanted to do something to make it better, because while I couldn't do anything about my situation, I could do something about someone else's. And that made me feel powerful, right? In a way that I was, my favorite Bible verse is, my grace is sufficient for you because my power is made in perfect weakness. And I think about that a lot. I think like, here I am this like very, weak individual, and that the only way I could actually really be powerful was by being powerful for other people. And that was really what I had control over. And that felt like a really empowering thing, that I didn't have to let my circumstance define me, but I could define it all for myself. And I didn't have to be Kendall, the sick girl. I could be Kendall, the girl that was helping other people. Wow. And so there were like a few things I think that really led me to do Kids Caring for Kids and to build it to what it became. The really, I think that at the end of the day, the empathy thing was the thing that most strongly kind of drew me to act.
That is incredible. That's beautiful, man. There's so much to this. This is so cool. What were some of the success stories? Some of the things that you were most proud of in kind of the process of bringing this organization to life as a kid?
Kids Caring for Kids essentially became a 501c3 back in January 2005. I was like not even a year out of my transplants. And so it became something that I just, after, having both of the transplants that summer, we'd raised about $20,000 and just knew I wanted to keep on going. And so my parents had a hard time saying no to a sick kid who wanted to help other people. So we applied for your 501c3, got approved, and then just ran this very basement organization where we, sold t-shirts and did penny wars and garage sales and bake sales and got other kids from other schools. And all of these kids started to do these things basically after reading my medical updates. So I'd post medical updates on this site called Care Pages that no longer exists because the internet has outgrown it essentially. But this was before blogs and before all of that. And so that was kind of my early days of communication, but it just continued to snowball. And so that became something that so many people were involved in. And I think what I'm most proud of is the kind of tangible impacts, right? Like building a high school or building a computer lab or, helping to kind of install indoor plumbing at this school. So we worked on a few different projects with different partner organizations.
Were those around the world? Were those in Zambia?
So they were all in sub-Saharan Africa. So mostly Zambia and South Africa, but also Kenya, and then one project in Ethiopia for a brief period of time.
Have you ever visited any of the projects?
I have, yes.
Oh, what was that like? When did you do that?
Oh, so I did that the summer after my junior year of high school. Cool. So we were about 8 years in already. So it'd been a long time of working on something without having really anything but pictures and stories. Because going to some of these countries, it's very difficult for me because I have a suppressed immune system because I've had 2 liver transplants. So very, very hard. Because if I get something, it's a really, really big deal. And so I had to be really careful. But we went and visited our projects in Zambia and South Africa. And one school in particular that we worked with for a while is called the Lifelong School for Orphans. And it's a K or pre-K through now 12th grade school that serves children who are double or single orphans. And it's a private school in Kitwe, Zambia. And it was just so amazing to go and to actually see meet and like see the people who are on the ground, meet the kids who are on the ground. Like it gave me a whole new sense of impetus to like continue on.
Good.
And yeah, I mean, I think it was overwhelming, really. Like, I think I never had any intention of Kids Caring for Kids becoming what it did. It was really driven by like one heart action, which was like me seeing this show.
Wow. Did you end up getting some like big attention? Like, did I perhaps
did,
see
yeah.
the name of the president of the United States at the time?
Yeah. Nice. I see how you did that. Yeah. So when I was 14, actually, we raised about $120,000 from like bake sales and
Whoa.
penny wars, like literally, truly kids like doing these things, which to me, I think is the other cool thing that I've always been super proud of, is that it truly was kids running this organization for other kids. And it was like kids doing the work, and it was kids doing the fundraising. And I'd get letters from like 8-year-olds in Florida who hosted a lemonade stand every weekend of the summer and raised $300. And like, that's so amazing, because I think for me, it was also about inspiring a generation of givers, right? And like, how do you build people into givers that will continue on in that habit for the rest of their life.
I want to hear the stories of all of these people who are impacted by you and like learned this art of giving and generosity because you were the catalyst initially. This is so inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool, and it was really cool to get letters back from like classrooms who would, learn, because we built like educational curriculum for our teachers, and we did all these things. But as you were referring to, when I was 14, basically one day President Clinton came to my high school. I was a freshman in high school, and it was like my second week of high school.
Is that cool or embarrassing?
It was overwhelming. It was so overwhelming. It was like I went to a big public high school, so about like 2,200 students. Wow. And so we were all packed into this gym, and no one knew what was going on. It was like this kind of surprise assembly that everyone was kind of very obscure. No one knew, even the teachers didn't know what was happening. And so we get in the assembly, and then our principal announces President Clinton, and everyone's like, what is he doing here? That's so random, because he wasn't the president at the time. But so he had just written this book called Giving, about how anyone can make a difference. And basically he started talking about, how our school was such a giving school. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. We're no different than anyone else. And then he said, I want to acknowledge one person at your school. And he said my name. And I just totally freaked out. Whoa. Because I was, so new to the school, so young. I actually was sick that day. I had a fever, and I wasn't actually sure if I should be at school. The day before, I had stayed home from school and was thinking, am I liver sick? Am I regular sick? Should I go to the hospital? Should I not? And so that was obviously kind of at the forefront of my mind. But I really wanted to go, and my mom, kind of knew. She knew the night before, so she basically pushed me out of the door. And the whole thing is such a crazy story in itself, but he announced to everyone what I was doing, and then said he was going to take me with him to be on the Oprah show.
What?
So I rode down in a presidential motorcade with President Clinton to be on the Oprah show. Day? Yeah, that day, right then and there, literally right then. So I get like whisked out of school to like go down, and I'm like driving in the presidential motorcade, and they're telling me all of this stuff, and I'm thinking, what? What am I wearing? Oh I don't know. I was like, no idea. Yeah. And I was on the Oprah show that day with President Clinton on an episode focused on his book about giving. And I was in a real world example of someone doing that, essentially. In one of the commercial breaks, it got crazier. Someone whispered into President Clinton's ear, and then Oprah, when it came back to the show, Oprah asked him to announce what had happened, what had been whispered in his ear. And someone who was traveling with President Clinton, had decided to donate $500,000 to my nonprofit right then and there.
Whoa.
And so everything changed. I think Kids Caring for Kids exploded in a way that we certainly were not prepared for. We rebuilt our website in the weekend prior to the show running because it was a taped show. And, I announced a goal of raising a certain amount of money and like $1 million. And the whole thing was just so wild. We started getting requests from basically everywhere in the world for me to come speak and do all these things. And all these kids wanted to do fundraisers. And, here we were, just like me and my mom and my dad and my brother just going, oh my gosh, like, what do we do? We were not prepared for this. And then obviously had a whole lot of money to do a lot of good with, which was also very exciting. And to figure out how to run like a really responsible and professional nonprofit.
Yeah, because it was originally $10 at a time.
Because it was so small. It was like peanuts, and we had momentum, but we certainly did not have our act together in a way that we were like a real organization. I mean, we were real as much as like me and my dad and my mom like going out and talking to like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but not like international real. And so that was an interesting time. And it certainly changed, I think, what Kids Caring for Kids would become. And then I think at that point, how my life would kind of change from that too, was very, very interesting.
What was high school like then? As somebody who
that's a good question, Branden.
Had millions of dollars under your control, but also, you're figuring things out. You're also speaking. You're getting asked to speak. What the heck is that even like?
Yeah. Well, my parents were really good about really kind of like protecting me and like basically saying you're going to be a normal kid, and you're going to do normal kid things. And like in our extra time, you can do these other things. So they were good because I think it could have been totally a different story. And I don't actually really know all that kind of came through our inbox at that time because I was so young and my parents were really kind of just taking care of sorting through what's good, what's bad, that kind of thing. And doing their best, I'm sure. But yeah, it was a lot of, I felt a little bit, this sounds so dumb, but I felt a little bit like I was living a double life, because I kept my, high school life so high school because I, just had so much, attention on me. And I think it was really hard because originally everyone was really excited about it at school. And then everyone really wanted to like figure out all the reasons they didn't like me. And so it became something that I was like so sensitive about and I would never talk about at school. I never did any kind of projects around it at school. I like completely had separated it because, you deal with mean girls or mean kids in general. And then you just never want it to be near you. And, other things would happen and people would write articles or something and my teachers would pin them up in their classrooms. And I just knew that there would be bad days if that had happened. Like I knew that if an article were to come out, I would have like a bad day at school, or a bad week because people would be really mean.
That's so
I think
hard.
that everyone really just wanted to fit everyone into one box. And I just knew that I was doing something good. And so I needed to keep on going regardless of what anyone else said. And the other really interesting piece of this whole story is that I was still really sick. Like I had a lot of complications from my second transplant, and I dealt with a complication that required me to have a procedure under general anesthesia every 6 weeks.
Whoa.
For 11 years after my second transplant, 11 years.
Wow.
And they tried to do surgery to fix it, and it didn't work. It was like a 13-hour surgery a couple of years after, and it didn't work. And so I was just living with this complication, trying to just do my best, but always knowing at a moment's notice, I could come into, a scenario where I needed immediate medical attention for an infection that would soon to become a blood infection that would be really kind of dangerous very quickly. And so I was kind of living these like in these very separate worlds where I'd have these really, really high highs and really, really low lows, and then going to high school in between and trying to be like a normal high school kid in a very not normal circumstance. And so it was a lot to navigate, and I would say it was kind of lonely at times. But it's weird looking back on it kind of all and seeing how I navigated it, because I really think I just did what I could when I could and try to, I don't know, do my best to move past hard things and continue on. But I definitely, high school was a hard period. It was a hard time in my life.
Wow. I can't imagine what that's like, having essentially you've got struggles with kind of your social life at high school. You also have medical struggles all at the same time that you're doing something ambitious, which is hard in and of itself. Wow. Okay.
I think I was born an overcompensator. and so I think I just so deeply didn't want anyone to ever think I was not good enough. And I'm sure that came from some kind of like, deep feelings of shame and pain in myself. But I think I just went so hard at life because I never knew what was going to happen. And I just wanted to make sure that I made the most of everything. And I wanted to make sure that it was all on my terms, even if most of my life was not on my terms. I wanted to pretend that it was.
That's really understandable, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
So you are kind of getting ready to leave high school, and it sounds like maybe that was exciting and a breath of fresh air and a kind of an escape. Did you know at that point that you wanted to go down the journalism world specifically?
Yeah, I always knew. I think I always knew. And I just kind of didn't really know how to pursue that in high school. And I didn't really know how to pursue that in middle school, obviously. And so I knew that eventually that's where I wanted my life to lead, because I think the thing that's kind of consistent in my life is that I want to share stories that matter. And I think that I started doing that when I was young through Kids Caring for Kids, sharing that one particular story that really mattered to me. And, I think I see my job now working in journalism is just kind of a extension on that. I just want to share stories that matter, and I want to inspire people to act. And so in a similar way that I felt inspired to act after watching a story, I want to create that kind of change in other people, because I certainly know what kind of impact it can make in my life, in people's lives. And to be able to kind of spur that kind of action is the dream.
You are speaking my language right now. I love this idea of how stories have the power to remind people of the good that can be done in the world, and then ultimately be a catalyst for people to take action, because it's so personally impactful, and then just like on a bigger scale, really impactful when you do get to take that action. But the stories have to come first. And so you show up at Mike. Is your first story this story with Alice Marie Johnson?
It's not my first story, but it was like maybe it was the first month. It was I think like the third week I was there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I pursued journalism in college, did all that kind of thing, and worked for CBS This Morning in the 2016 presidential election, did that whole thing, and really kind of struggled because Kids Caring for Kids, we had a larger organization adopt it as its kids branch.
Got it. Because you weren't a kid anymore.
Because I wasn't a kid anymore, because I knew that I didn't want to run it as my full-time job. And I continued working on it throughout college, and it just became really difficult to balance that with the competing interest of pursuing journalism, honestly, and pursuing this other kind of career. And so that was really kind of a hard, painful process. But ended up finding a great partner and people I really felt comfortable with. And honestly, to this day, it's such a different variation of what it was. But to me, it doesn't really matter, because I think Kids Caring for Kids has always been a vehicle to inspire people to do good things for other people.
That's
and as
cool.
long as that's happening in some form, I feel good about it.
That's awesome.
And so that took me a while to kind of grapple with, just because it was such a huge part of my identity and my life. It was like, a huge, my 12, 13 years of my life working on something. And at that point, when we had someone, kind of a larger organization, adopt it, that was like half of my life working on Kids Caring for Kids. And so that was an interesting decision. And finding Mike was certainly a blessing in disguise. I had, quit a job that I was really unhappy with, and was really kind of going through it in the, who am I? What do I want to do? How do I don't even know anymore. I almost took a job in tech PR. It had some dark days. It was an interesting time, which I think is natural. I think a lot of people go through that after college.
100%.
And it was so foreign for me, because I always was so clear on what I wanted and what I thought I wanted to do. And I hit a little bit of a road bump and felt like kind of really discouraged from my first place of work, and just wasn't sure anymore. And I was actually really surprised by myself that I let that deter me, because I'd really never let anything else deter me. And so, I landed at Mike, which was an incredible choice, and fell into this situation where we had, this incredible story to share. And I ended up getting to interview Alice and produce the piece on her, and then continue to follow her journey to clemency.
Man.
So it's been a ride.
I love that journey. I love that there's so many different things that all are coming together, and the common thread isn't necessarily one niche of making a difference. The common thread is making a difference, or the common thread is empathy, or the common thread is action. It's this broader thing that you've brought together so many different aspects of your life.
Yeah, I think that is something that's super hard for people, especially when they've committed, a lot of themselves to one thing. It's like, well, how do you reinvent yourself and pursue something else that you're interested in, especially when you are a founder of something, or just spend a lot of your time committed to one entity. And for me, I really was always inspired by Cory Booker, who said, I don't aspire to hold a position. I aspire to live a mission.
That's
and
good.
That really kind of that was really good. It was really good. It just totally opened my eyes to the idea that I didn't have to hold a position. It was significantly more important that I aspired to a mission. And so, I'm okay. Whatever I do within this greater, umbrella is fitting. And so I'm going to let myself explore and my life explore all these different kinds of paths, as long as they touch that. And that will be the guiding principle of my life, is if I'm touching on helping elevate voices that I, believe the world needs to hear. And so whether that's through a charity, an organization, whether that's through stories, whether being a journalist, whatever kind of storytelling, venue or method that takes, that's really what I want to do. And I think that Mike has really taught me that it's possible.
Man,
which is cool.
That's so cool. And so at Mike, you've got this story where you've got Alice Marie Johnson, who, was incarcerated for life as a first-time offender for a nonviolent crime. And you basically were just talking about this as kind of a grander story with this interview. And it goes public, and then it goes viral. Tell me about those first 24, 48 hours of it blowing up.
So there were a couple of iterations of it, right? So the first was the big public announcement So essentially what happened was Kim, there was an article that came out about a month after our piece that said the Kim Kardashian was looking into the cases of Cyntoia Brown and Alice Marie Johnson. And this is after we'd published our first piece with Alice. Kim had retweeted it.
I think that's how I saw the piece initially, was Kim retweeting it.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
Yeah. She commented on it, like, this is heartbreaking, retweeted it, shared it with her followers. It like exploded our video online. All these other celebrities were tweeting about it.
Broke records.
Yeah, totally. Basically, like, we kept on going on and doing other stories. And, we did something with Alice's daughter, but we also pursued a variety of other things and kind of moved on. And always kind of in the back of our heads thinking, she could get out maybe. Like, maybe, like, we'll follow this, I guess. And so we saw the article a month later that Kim was interested in this case. And we're like, wait, what? She's doing what with Alice Johnson? And it was very vague, but said she was like looking into getting involved in the cases of these two women. And so we were like on a mad dash. And when I say we, I mean me and the guy I work with, Jake Horowitz, who's actually the co-founder of Mike. And so together we were on this kind of wild goose chase to find Kim and get in contact with her and to figure out what she was doing.
How did you get in touch with her?
Yeah, so we finally
What's
got
her
in
number?
touch with her.
Just kidding.
Yeah, not going to tell you that.
Understand.
We finally got in touch with her team, and we ended up actually meeting Kim in the audience at March for Our Lives.
Oh, cool.
And said, hey, like, we did this story on Alice. And it quickly kind of spurred into this thing where, we went out to LA and actually did a sit-down interview with Kim about why she was wanting to get involved and that she had been talking to the White House. And then we broke that story, and that story went massively viral. Kim Kardashian was in talks with the White House about Alice Marie Johnson.
And that's a big deal because it's this remarkable thing. And I saw this tweet that week that said something along the lines of, somehow Kim Kardashian has found a way to have this conversation with the White House, to kind of do a deal and to kind of use her celebrity to make a difference in this White House without tarnishing our respect for her. It's this remarkable and unique thing that she was able to pull off, because there's so many people who have gone to work in the White House or have gone to like advocate for something with the president, and people have thought less of them afterwards, just kind of publicly.
Yeah.
And somehow you guys break this story and people go, well, you know what? I think Kim can do it. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think, she definitely did get a lot of flack for it. A lot of people had a lot of things to say. But, I think that's the case with anything. She was involved long before anyone else knew about it. And so, to me, I just always think that, her intentions were very pure in this. And that's really what we experienced.
That's really cool.
And it was really cool. And basically what happened was she ended up going to the White House. So we followed her there and did the whole kind of behind the scenes with her, ride to, ride from, in the hotel after, talking to her, interviewing her. And then, continued along in telling the story of Alice. And so I went out and shot interviews with basically all of her family members, all of her children. Yeah, I mean, just was really kind of trying to tell this full story, because it's not just the Kim story, it's also the Alice story. And I think that's really important to remember.
And every family member of Alice and this whole greater life that she's missing out on because she's in jail.
Yeah, absolutely. She had 5 children, and 4 were living. And so we went out and visited all 4 of them, interviewed all of them. I spent like so many months traveling,
I bet.
not really sleeping in my bed, which was interesting, and just on nonstop. And, between Kim and between Alice, like kind of going back and forth, telling both sides of the story. And then was actually in Memphis with Alice's family members with Alice's son and grandson when we got the news that Trump had granted her clemency. So actually got to tell them that it had happened, and then did the whole drive down with the family to prison to pick up Alice outside of the facility that she was being held in ironically, Aliceville, Alabama, was where she was being held. So we did that whole drive down, drive back, got her. There was obviously a huge media circus outside, and just kind of continued to tell the story. We were there, that whole night when she had gotten out, and interviewed her immediately, and were there with her family. They had this huge party. Half of the relatives went down to Alabama, and then half of them stayed in Memphis and prepared a party with like every family member they have, it was just such an incredible experience to witness all of it and to be a part of all of it and
be a catalyst for all of it. I mean, you weren't just a part of it, but like...
Yeah. There were so many people involved in the story, and there were amazing lawyers at the case, and there were a lot of factors. And, I think to even be a small part of like that story is just something I never could have ever imagined or predicted. And I think, to go back to the idea of inspiring other people to do good in the world, it just so happened that person was Kim Kardashian. And that's totally random, but very cool that it actually, that's my goal, is to tell stories that inspire people to act. And it's very clear that that's what happened, which is more than I could ever have asked for.
That is so incredible. It's interesting because, you had this journey where, you had an impact as a kid, and then you were trying to figure out later, okay, now what am I doing? And you had maybe a quarter life crisis, and you found a really great deal of success your first month into this new job. I guess, first of all, like, what does that feel like? Does it feel lucky, or does it feel like, the outcome of years and years of sticking to a mission?
I don't believe in luck, so I'll just say that. I think I try to live my life very intentionally, and certainly that landed in my lap, and I felt that way, truly. I think we did awesome work on the story, but, that was being at the right place at the right time, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think it's all about, preparation meets opportunity kind of thing. But really, to me, honestly, like, the whole thing felt so much more touched by something bigger than me. I think faith has always been a really important part of my life. And I really feel like that was the role I felt God was playing, was, orchestrating this story to be something. And I don't know, to me personally, it was really incredible to watch just the people that were involved, because I don't think that anyone would have expected that Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian could come together to do this. I think is not something that people would have predicted, certainly not what I would have predicted. And to me, it was really kind of a deeper message of God can do anything with anyone. God using and aligning all of these different people to do something that he wanted to do in a circumstance that certainly no one expected, because again, she had been denied 3 times, and denied by Obama, who had been really, really big on granting clemency. So, under this administration, for this to happen felt like such a huge feat that was just so unlikely. And I think as far as my greater life, when I'm looking at it and how it impacted my life, I think it made me think, like, keep doing what you're doing and keep sticking to what you believe you're supposed to be doing here. And that's kind of what I've thought my whole life is. I just need to do what I think I'm here to do. And maybe I won't always get it right. Maybe it certainly won't be easy, but that if God wants you there, God will put you there. And, I believe he makes a way when there's no way. I really do. And so that's just how I live my life. And I'm not here to say that I always believe that or really feel that, especially, when I was really struggling post-grad. Another really interesting piece of this story is that I ended up finding this surgeon who fixed my complication, my 11-year complication from my transplant, my second transplant. He was the only person in the world who thought he could fix this issue. Everyone else disagreed with him, including my own doctors. And he fixed it. And
Wow.
I am healthier than I've ever been in my entire life. And I think I hit that point after I graduated and I had this whole life and I had these huge struggles and all of a sudden I was free from this constant resistance. And I had nothing kind of pushing up against me. And I was just so lost. I had no idea how to live. And that sounds really strange to most people. But I think when you're in a certain situation, you grow, you adapt to it. And to me, struggle was something I adapted to. It was something that was always in my face. My worst fear was always in my face. And I had no control over it. So I just like went hard and I just like balled out on life and really just went at it because I had no fear, because my fear was with me always. And so that was my greatest fear. So everything else seemed small. And so now, like, after I graduated and I had this crazy surgery that no one ever thought I could have, and it took a year to decide whether or not to have it because it was so risky and all of these things, all of this buildup. And then all of a sudden I was like, it was over. And I didn't have this constant fear in my life in the same way anymore. And I think that it really threw me for a loop. And I had to figure out, okay, well, who am I now that I don't run Kids Caring for Kids, now that I don't have this constant struggle in my life? Who am I? What do I want to do now that I'm free from all of these things? It was almost like the freedom of it all was the scary. It was something I hadn't anticipated being so scary. And so learning to re-trust and kind of center myself in who I always was, that I didn't lose any part of who I was because all of those big life changes had happened. I was still the same person, kind of grounding myself in who I've always been and what I've always valued was the thing I think that has allowed me to continue on the path of living out the mission. Like, I had a road bump, I wasn't sure what I was doing, and then I like refound it. And that's how I feel now. I feel like I've refound it. So I think that this was certainly, again, like I said, right place, right time. But in a lot of ways, it feels like, no, you just found the mission again.
Honestly, I feel like I need a lot of time to process everything Kendall shared in our conversation. It is just so wild to think about how our lives are constantly turning pages and things come that we never could have or would have predicted for ourselves. Oh my gosh, like so many parts of Kendall's story. Yet they change us forever and they can change the lives of other people. My hope is that this conversation leaves you feeling more hopeful and less overwhelmed. Kendall's story reminds me that we are not our circumstances, and there is so much impact that happens when we choose to help others despite whatever adversity we may be facing. On that note, I hope you're inspired to follow Kendall as her story continues to unfold. I've been following her for a while now, and actually in the time between recording this episode and releasing it, she went to the White House again. So go dive into that, follow her, etc. on Instagram and Twitter. On top of that, you can check out all of her professional work at Mike and her upcoming speaking engagements on her official website at kendallciesemier.com. If you're new to Sounds Good, we would love for you to stick around. You'd also love my conversations with Tiffany Mitchell and Esme Wang, both women who are living with creative ambition in the face of adversity. You can find both of these episodes and more than 100 other episodes by searching for Sounds Good wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep getting more inspiring conversations with incredible people delivered to your phone while you sleep. And for those of you who are regular listeners to the podcast, please consider supporting the show by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. This podcast is created by me, Branden Harvey, as a part of Good, 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 a community that believes in the power of celebrating good news and becoming good news. Chad Michael Snavely and the team at CM Studio edit mix the show, and Christy Karenbrock offers production support. You can get lots of hopeful stories on social media by following us everywhere at GoodGoodGoodCO. We also create a beautiful quarterly newspaper that celebrates the people, ideas, and movements that are changing the world for the better. It's called the Good Newspaper, and we actually just released our newest issue. Issue 5 holds pages and pages of stories that are full of real, messy hope. And you can order it today. Check it out at the link in our show notes and see what else we do at GoodGoodGood at goodgoodgood.co. And on that note, that is a wrap for this week's episode. Go out and remember to see your boldness, your vision, and your particular spark in the world as an opportunity to inspire others to persevere and to engage in the world. Sound good?